5 books and counting. The Tales from the Omni Vault continues to expand as a universe. Go ahead and check the links down in the description to get your copies today. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm the Omni Viewer, and I didn't really intend to have the beginning of January be filled with so much rambling unscripted content, but that's just the way it's shaken out. Anyway, on to the next rambling unscripted video, in which I'll be looking at the 4th issue of Godzilla, well, actually Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong. You'll forgive me, my instinct is always to put Godzilla first in these kind of things. As usual, been collecting the covers. Apparently they decided to go with similar but different approaches for these two alternates. Godzilla with a member of the Super Family and a member of the Bat Family, and Kong also gets Wonder Girl way in the background for some reason. But this is the main cover, which hints at the actual content of the book, in which Godzilla shows up in Atlantis, where Tiamat is also attacking. Now, one thing I've noted in reviewing the previous issues is that the plot's been kinda slow. For what little plot there is, of course. I mean, obviously this sort of thing isn't going to be that heavy on complexities, but, you know, for what plot it has, it sure is taking its sweet time. I mean, 3 issues in, we still didn't have any characters knowing who the monsters were. They're still very confused about what's going on. The Legion of Doom has more of an idea than the Justice League, but even they're struggling to try figuring out all the details. And I was wondering how long it was going to take for things to pick up. Things actually have picked up in issue 4. I mean, obviously, we're still in the aftermath of Superman dying, which we all know he's not really dead. But beginning with issue 3, of course, we knew things were going to start picking up at least a little because Lex Luthor found the remains of Mechagodzilla. Here, we get confirmation that he is rebuilding Mechagodzilla, and in particular, he actually now knows more than anyone else in the DC universe about what's going on, because he is the first one to actually identify one of the Titans by name, specifically Godzilla, and he also knows Godzilla is his enemy. He doesn't necessarily think Godzilla is going to be an ally of the Justice League per se, but he does know that Godzilla is not going to just wantonly destroy. So he needs Mechagodzilla in order to really make things work, because Mechagodzilla is the only thing that could possibly take on Godzilla. And if it can take on Godzilla, who killed Superman, mind you, then it can definitely take on everything else. Now, in addition to that, we also have Tiamat attacking Atlantis, which, you know, took him this long to get Aquaman and his crew in on the action. And because Tiamat's attacking Atlantis, Godzilla also shows up. We know that he's there probably to wrangle Tiamat. In fact, there seems to be some kind of signal that's, I think it's pretty clear Lex Luthor is sending it to basically just sort of confuse the monsters, send them hither and yon so that they're not coming after him. And by extension, the Justice League will be dealing with them and also ignoring him. Not a bad move on his part. And that particular side of things with the Atlantis battle concludes with Aquaman releasing their own kaiju. He literally releases the Kraken. And of course we don't see how that plays out in this issue. It's probably gonna kick off the beginning of issue 5. But at least we do know that they're trying to bring in some of the DC original monsters to be part of the action as well. I think I and several other people are holding out that they'll bring in Starro, perhaps, because, like, he's one of the quintessential DC giant monster character villains, but there's no guarantee of that. They'd have to actually find a reason for him to show up, like they did with the Kraken here. He's there because he is Atlantis's last line of defense when literally everything else isn't working. So naturally they would bring him in at this point. I have no doubt that Godzilla's probably going to kick his tentacle behind, but, you know, all the same, they found a reason to bring him in. So I don't want Starro to show up just to show up. I do still hope he does show up, though. For as much as the plot is moving forward, though, some stuff is also still kind of stuck. In particular, Kong. I'm kind of surprised at how little they've been using Kong in this book. I mean, his name is in the title. Sure, he gets third billing, but he's still one of the main draws, right? And yet, while Godzilla's been going all over the map, Behemoth showed up at Themyscira, Silo was in Central City and whatnot, Kong's still just hanging out on Skull Island doing his thing. Apparently, since the last issue, he's been having a staring contest with Supergirl that only ends because Supergirl has her Kal-El sense tingle or something. That actually sounded far worse saying out loud than it did in my head. But she leaves because she has to go confirm that Superman is not in fact as dead as he appears. So Green Arrow's still on Skull Island, and he's there to fight off a bunch of League of Assassins goons that just literally show up out of nowhere. He takes out a couple of them until Kong shows up and takes care of them for him. But there's still not really anything that's getting Kong involved in the proceedings. In fact, that particular side of things means that the issue ends on kind of a weird cliffhanger, where Oliver Queen, sees a boat off the shore of Skull Island that maybe is what the League of Assassins came on. I'm just going to assume that's what it is, because otherwise that boat has no explanation. I'm sure we'll get it confirmed in issue 5. So he lands on there to see what's going on, and he's looking around. He sees a giant skullcrawler skull inside. To be continued. Ooh? I'm not really sure what that's supposed to mean. Best I can figure is that since Lex Luthor is rebuilding Mechagodzilla, they might be bringing the skull in as a reference to how in the movie Godzilla vs. Kong, Mechagodzilla was controlled by using King Ghidorah skulls. Except, if that is what they're doing, that makes no sense, because the reason they specifically used the Ghidorah skulls for Mechagodzilla was because they had a psychic link to each other, which the Skullcrawlers have not been shown to have themselves. I'm not even sure the Skullcrawlers have a high enough brain function to even have just basic ideas, let alone psychic abilities. So, I don't know, maybe they're just making do with what they've got, but I guess we'll see what happens. It's just sort of a weird note to end on, because it's like, this is treated like a big reveal, and if you're familiar with the Monsterverse, you're just like, okay, Skullcrawler skull, sure, so what? We've already seen Kong trash one of those way back in like the first or second issue. I think actually in both. So, what's the big deal there? Again, it feels kind of like the Skull Island side of things hasn't really progressed anywhere. You know, it is weird. Kong, you'd think, well, I guess Kong gets the lion's share of dramatic stuff in the movies, so in this particular comic, I'm not necessarily going to be that distraught to see him just sort of sitting back on Skull Island and taking care of things there. In fact, I have a sneaking suspicion that all of this action is going to ultimately get back to Skull Island, and that's where the finale will occur. But otherwise, it is still weird. Because, again, his name is in the title, and he's barely been in this series. And when he does show up, he doesn't really do that much. Although, like I said, Godzilla's been pretty active, and clearly that was the main draw, like I've been saying from the beginning. The reason this comic exists seems to be mostly centered on the idea of Godzilla in the DC universe, rather than the monsterverse crossing over with the DC universe. So, you know, I guess when that's your focus, some things are going to fall to the wayside, even if they shouldn't. Now, the big question for me is, are they going to get this all wrapped up by the end? Like I said, the plot's been moving kind of slow, even for a plot that doesn't necessarily have that much to it. And it's going to be 7 issues long from what I understand, which is a pretty good length for a limited series. IDW only ever allowed like 5 per limited series, so 7, that's a pretty good extension. But we're 4 issues in, and it's only now just picking up. And even then, only in certain parts. Some parts are still just kind of spinning their wheels in the mud. So they've only got 3 issues left to bring Superman back into the picture, get everyone in the Justice League up to speed on how Godzilla's not the enemy, either get Kong off of Skull Island or get everyone else to Skull Island, and somehow get Toyman to reverse all of this. Actually, that's another thing I almost forgot to mention. The issue does confirm that the reason Godzilla's going on his rampage through the DC universe is because he's after Toyman, who still has the Dreamstone. Godzilla just somehow knows that's the cause of the problem. And he seems to be the only one. The Legion of Doom suspects it too, but they don't seem to really be doing much about it, of course, because, you know, they're the bad guys. Anyway, they've only got those 3 issues to get everything tied up. They can potentially do it, but will they? That's the million-dollar question at this point. All I can say for now is that, as far as recent MonsterVerse works have been going, this one so far has yet to completely lose me. I mean, Skull Island animated series was bad from the beginning. Monarch started out intriguing, kind of lost me by the end. This one, of course, is just aiming for pure escapist simplicity of just displaying superheroes and monsters in the same universe, icons who have never met before, and this is probably the only chance we'll ever get to see them interact. But still, I'm wondering how they're going to actually get to the end and deliver a satisfying conclusion based on how it's been progressing up to this point. It's ultimately not going to matter that much because this is literally just its own thing. It's probably not going to have anything to do with the rest of the MonsterVerse or the DC universe. I would be absolutely amazed if Godzilla Kong the New Empire has a line saying, hey, remember when all the Titans just briefly vanished and we didn't know where they were? It's like they were in another universe or something. I doubt that's going to happen. It'll be really weird if it does. But at this point, I guess I can still just enjoy the series for the fact that it is a crossover for its own sake. And I'm going to keep taking it at that level. It still has to be quality, of course, by the end. But I know that it's not aiming for high art. It's just aiming for fun. So far, it is still fun. It just really needs to get going at this point. It can't keep putting things off for too much longer. So here's hoping issue 5 is where things really pick up. But that's a month away. So until such time as that happens, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Thank you all for watching. Now be sure to head down to the description to check us out on other platforms, as well as find links to the 5 current books in the Tales from the Omni Vault universe. Again, thank you all, and we'll see you next time.